can go ahead and get started now. And I wanted to welcome everyone to the Certified Exam Security Professional webinar. My name is Jamie Mulkey, and we have a presentation today. Let's go to our next slide, and I'll introduce our presenters. I'll be first talking about the program in general and discussing some of the ways that you can help prepare to take the exam. Then Caveon's CEO, Dave Foster, will be talking about the exam itself, how it was designed and how it was developed. And as he'll discuss, there are a number of first-time things that we tried with this in developing this exam. So it's pretty exciting, and we're really excited to share that with you. Mark Poole, who, as many of you may know, is a test security professional and also our first CESP-Generalist, certified generalist, is going to talk about his experiences with the exam, and hopefully that will give you some tips as well in helping you prepare to take the exam. Let's go to our next slide. So before I talk about what CESP is, I thought I would give you some background on how the program actually came to be created. And one of the things that started to happen in the area of test security is that we started to realize it was a growing profession. Individuals were beginning to come together to discuss their different test security issues. We saw benchmarking going on, so there was a lot of sharing of best practices so that organizations could learn from other organizations about what were the best things to do to help thwart test security threats. We also started to see a lot of presentations at the different industry conferences, and subcommittees were formed, and they have, they've taken on kind of a life of their own in terms of the activities that they've put together to provide deliverables to testing programs and helping them with their test security needs. We also started to see organizations that created test security positions. So there were actually people that were in charge of this area called test security, and people wanted to know, okay, what does a test security director or manager test security do? What should that job description look like? So really the next logical step for us was providing a credential, something that would turn test security into a professional community, give it that seal of approval. And that's where we came up with CESP, or the Certified Exam Security Professional Program. So this program is really dedicated to the exam security professional. What we're hoping to do here is recognize individuals' experience and expertise in the area of exam security. And what you'll find with this exam is that we really cover the breadth of exam security challenges. So, as a generalist, we're not just looking at one area, say security planning, but we're looking at all of the areas. So it covers things such as secure exam design, data forensics, web and media monitoring, information technology, really giving you that broad brushstroke of test security. And also, the exam is based on standards. So it's based on the test security standards that are promoting the integrity of high-stakes testing programs. Let's go to our next slide. So who should take the exam? Well, this exam is really designed for individuals who are interested in seeking either more responsibility in protecting the integrity of high-stakes exams. It's for those folks who want to, actually demonstrate their skills and knowledge in this area of test security. And we want to make sure that these are folks that are prepared to handle the possible exam security threats that happen with testing programs. So this exam is really designed to help validate test security knowledge in becoming a recognized expert in test security. Let's go to our next slide. I thought I would give you some of the details about taking the exam and some of the policies around taking the exam. First, you want to know that there are 2 levels of certification. Although there is 1 exam, we have 2 cut scores. And we did this so that we could help distinguish expertise and really give people a value for the expertise that they have. So the cost of the exam is $175 for each attempt, and you can take the exam up to 2 times. If you have 2 failed attempts, then you need to wait 3 months after that second failed attempt to take the exam again. And that's designed so that you have some time to study, go back and prepare before taking that next attempt. And we will not allow anyone to take more than 5 attempts of the exam without permission. So the cut score for the Generalist Level 1 is 120. And let's go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about Level 2. The cut score for Level 2 is 170. So on the Generalist Level 2 exam, you can retake the exam up to 2 times after passing a Level 1. So let's say you obtained Level 1 certification, but you really want to make it to Level 2. You have 2 retake attempts. And then again, there's a 3-month waiting period after that second failed attempt. And it looks like we have our first poll question.
We do. I'll go ahead and launch that poll, Jamie. Okay, so our first poll question today is, we're just wondering if you plan on taking the CESP-Generalist exam within the next 6 months. Please go ahead and cast your vote there. We'll give you just a few seconds. Okay, about 80% have voted, about 3 more seconds. Okay, great. Let me go ahead and close the poll, and I will share the results with you all. All right, Jamie, back to you.
So it looks like, yeah, it looks like 30% of the folks on the call today will be taking or will attempt the exam in the next 6 months, and some folks are still undecided. So maybe they want to hear what we have to say here today, and then they'll decide about taking the exam soon. Why don't we move on to the next slide? Some of you may be thinking, well, what's the best way for me to study for this exam? I'm going to give you 2 areas to study from, but really where you want to go is to the website, which is CESPsearch.org. And you'll look for a link to resources. And there are 2 types of resources in there. There's the general resources, and then there are resources per the blueprint. So for every competency, we've listed specific resources as well. But let me go back to the general resources. So we've got this general resource list that includes books and white papers, research papers, as well as the industry standards and guidelines. And the reason that we did this is because, one, there's some general things that we expect people to know. But in particular, about those industry standards and guidelines, we want to make sure that people know where test security fits into those standards and guidelines and how they are used. So that if you ever have to reference it, you'll know where to go and what the best standard or guideline is to use for a particular situation. The specific resources, again, are listed under each competency within the blueprint, and those include things like white papers and webinars and blog articles, as well as chapters. And one of the resources I really wanted to mention was the Exam Security Breach Summary. And this is a document that has a compilation of 15 different breaches that were discussed in the media. But what we've done, actually what Dave Foster did, because he put this together, was to kind of distill the information into a common format for each of the breaches. So it discusses what was the breach, when did it happen, who participated in the breach, who found the breach, and what were the results, what were the implications of those breaches. So this is a really great resource, as well as being interesting reading. It will help you prepare for the exam. Lastly, there are some training resources coming, and these are what I like to call the online primers. So if you are somebody who is fairly new to test security, this is a great place. This would be a great place to get started with your baseline knowledge. So again, these will be online. They will be paid resources. You'll have to pay to use them, but also they'll be, I think, well worth it for those folks who need to get that baseline. Let's go to the next slide. I wanted to talk about what to expect during the exam. The application process, again, by going to the CESP Cert website, there is a link on the left-hand side that gets you to the application. So when you go through the application process, you're going to give us some demographic information. We'll take 2 forms of photo ID. One will be a government-issued photo ID. The other one will be a recent picture. Once your application has been accepted, we'll go ahead and schedule you for a date to take the exam. And then what you'll need is 2 devices to take the exam. So the first one is going to be your computer. And this is a web-based test. So you'll use your computer to get to the internet, and we'll have our proctor launch the test. But the other device is a mobile device. And this can be either a smartphone or a tablet. But you're going to be running Skype on that mobile device and sitting that device next to you from a side view. So the proctor will actually be watching you from a side view as you take your test. And we did this, again, with security in mind, because we don't need our proctors watching you or watching the screen. We don't want to expose our items unnecessarily. So they'll be watching you from the side, they'll launch the test for you, and they'll also be monitoring you using some screen monitoring software so that we make sure that you stay on the exam administration screen and that you're not going to other places during the exam administration process. So then we will go through exam administration. When you finish the test, you will get your preliminary or provisional score report or results. We'll go ahead and validate those score results, and if you pass, then you'll receive one of the digital badges for successful completion. So that's a basic overview. What I'd like to do now is turn the time over to Dave Foster, and he will talk about the exam itself. Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome, Jamie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I want to welcome all of you to the webinar, and thanks for attending and for your interest in the program. I've been asked to talk about these 3 topics on the slide: how we designed the test, how we built it, and how we decided to administer it. So we'll proceed in that order. So the next slide, please. As far as the design of the exam, we wanted it to be brief. It's important to keep professionals at their jobs or other important tasks and not taking tests. So we made the exam brief enough to give us a good, accurate measurement of a person's knowledge of security, and to do so with confidence that that score represents their real ability. The test itself primarily measures your ability to recall information that you have learned or have experienced over time. It's comprehensive, covering every security topic we could think of. As the test is given, we do embed some pre-test items. These are not scored. We just are collecting data on them to use in future exams. Our overriding design purpose for the CESP exam was security. We wanted it to the design of the test to prevent or reduce the exposure of content, and therefore to deter cheating and the theft of that content. So you'll see as we built the test and as we administer it that security was, of course, a primary concern, which I hope you would expect from us. So next slide, please, Tristan. So there are two major design features that impact security to a very great extent. One is adaptive testing. So I'm assuming all of you know about that. It's a test that takes an item pool and selects questions based on how well the person is doing during the exam. So it adapts the exam to the ability level of the person. By so doing, it presents a small percentage of the items in the pool. In this case, we present about 14%. That's 14% of the items anytime we administer the test. So just keep that in mind. The second design feature is we use the discrete option multiple choice. I'm hoping you have heard about that particular multiple choice variety. Very briefly, it takes the same content of a multiple choice question and of a traditional multiple choice question, presents the options one at a time randomly, and asks the test taker to simply respond yes or no as to whether the option they see is the correct one or a correct one. A super DOMC item is one with more than the usual 4 or 5 options. When our writers began to build this test, we required them to produce as a target 10 options per item. As the items went through their usual reviews, we ended up between 5 and 15 options for the items in the pool. Now, the value of this is that for any time one of those items is presented, only about 2 or 3 on the average options are presented. So which means about 25% of the options is ever shown when an item is shown. That combined with the adaptive test means we're only presenting during an entire test 3% of the content, the critical content for that exam. That it makes it very difficult to steal or memorize the content and share with others to have it be effective. So very strong design features. I wish every test would be built with these features. We would have many fewer security problems. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, how do we build the test? We used industry experts at every stage. Most of you are very aware of the process of building items and the test itself and the importance of using subject matter experts. We used our Caveon or our internal subject matter experts for writing the items, doing a couple of the reviews. We used external subject matter experts also in the reviews of items, in the development of the job analysis, creating the blueprint. So subject matter experts, internal and external to Caveon, were part of it. Our external subject matter experts were, signed strong non-disclosure agreements, and in general, they saw smaller percentages of the item pool. I've listed here on this slide the steps we went through, and they should be fairly typical until the last one, probably. The job analysis, creating a blueprint, authoring the items, reviewing the items, and what we did at the end was to rate the final version of the items for difficulty. Rather than run a field test and obtain statistics on the items, we created the difficulty estimates through a rating system using our experts. Many external individuals participated in that as well. And we used that difficulty rating to set the cut score and to support the process of giving an adaptive test, which depends heavily on reliable difficulty estimates. So it's fairly unique in that. So let's go to the next slide, please. What we're going to do on the CESP-Cert.org website is present the data we collected, the research we've run that indicates evidence of validity. One of probably the most important standard in the testing industry is that your tests are valid, or at least that you interpret and use the scores in a valid way. As evidence of validity so far, we have the process that we went through to develop the tests, which I just went through in the previous slide. And we did one study so far. It's a supervisor rating study. 5 of us at Caveon rated all the Caveon employees as to whether they should pass or fail the test. Then we had everybody in Caveon take the test, and we see that we had a correct classification rate of 0.74 or 74%. We did make some errors in that classification, and mainly many of our employees did a bit better on the test than we had expected them to do. Accounts for almost all of the errors we made. But it still is a pretty healthy classification rate and indicates validity. We'll reproduce this study from time to time and add additional studies, so anybody going out to the website can see how well the test is doing and how the data we've collected on its validity. So next slide, please. So administering the CESP securely. We decided on a kind of internet model where you can take the test wherever you are, as long as you have laptop, internet connection, your cell phone, as long as it's quiet. We decided to monitor the exam using online proctors. Jamie mentioned a little bit about this. So we used the candidate's cell phone and a chat program. I think Skype is the one we use, and we are able to watch and communicate with the candidate at all times. We see a large view of the room. We can see more if we wish. We can hear what's going on. And most importantly, I think, the proctors have control over the testing session. If they see something, a problem, they have a question, they can pause the exam, communicate with the test taker, and then either restart the exam, unpause it, or cancel it if it turns out to be a serious problem. So the proctors have some teeth, and they can help the client and customer through the process, the candidate through the process, as well as be professional in their proctoring efforts. We require strong examinee agreements before this test can launch, and we have a solid authentication process. We collect photographs of the person when they register. The proctor has those available in order to launch the test and make sure they match who the person sitting in front of them. And then finally, we have a post-verification process. A candidate can allow a potential employer or school to view his or her certificate for the certification, and it will have their photographs and IDs all printed on that website as well. So all of that will ensure people will not attempt to take the test for others. Next, please. I've mentioned this a lot, but we've got a pretty good design for the test for security, and administration is solid. Security, of course, is not assured with those. It's not assured with anything, but you want as many security measures as you can, and so the CESP program utilizes a data forensics process. It monitors the web, and it has a team ready to conduct investigations should the need arise, among other security measures. So just to from beginning to end, the CESP program makes an effort to make sure that that credential is worth something. Cannot be questioned in terms of its validity. Next slide, please. And finally, I'll end up with just some innovations that we have put into the CESP program and exam. And first is the first exam to use the DOMC in a high-stakes manner. First to use the super DOMC. There's a lot of people using online proctoring. I don't know, I think we may be the first to do it ourselves. It was the first use of an adaptive test that uses item difficulty ratings, and the first use of a cognitive science model called information integration theory to set the cut scores. These are a few of the, I think there are probably, I could make up another list of things that we're doing for the first time. I apologize that those of you who will be taking this test are experiencing something fairly different and fairly new, although I think it will be common in the future. And I appreciate your willingness to, I'm not going to say guinea pigs, we're pretty confident in the process, but to follow this new approach to certification testing. So that's all I have for my slides. I will turn the time back to Jamie. I think we have another poll right now.
Yes, we do.
Great, and I will go ahead and launch that poll. We just would like to know how many of you have tried the DOMC item type. Okay, about half of you have voted. Give you a few more seconds. Okay, looks like the voting has stopped. I'll go ahead and share those results with you.
So it looks like about 35% of the folks have actually tried the DOMC item type. The other folks have not. So there are a couple of places to try the DOMC item type. The first one is www.trydomc.com, and there are a number of different sample items in different genres that use this item type. The other place to check, and this is another great preparation resource, is on the CESPcert.org website. Under resources, we have a sample set of CESP items in the DOMC item format. So this is not meant as a diagnostic test in terms of telling you how well you will do on the test, but rather it's meant to give you an idea of the type of content that you'll see on the exam, and to also help get you familiar with the DOMC item format. Thank you so much, Dave. What I'd like to do now is turn the time over to our guest, Mark Poole. And Mark is a certification lead with Facebook, but he is also our first certified CESP generalist. So Mark, I'll turn the time over to you and have you talk about your experience with the exam.
All right, sorry for that. Can people hear me now? Jamie, can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can. We can hear you, Mark.
All right, not familiar with the mute button, obviously. So, welcome everybody who was able to join today. Some of you know me, perhaps many of you don't. As Jamie mentioned, I've been a security professional for 15 years. I started the test security program at Pearson VUE back in really 2001, the global security program. So I've been around a while, maybe perhaps not as long as Jamie and David, but for 15 years. So I've seen a lot of things happen over the years. First of all, I just want to point out that I wasn't given any favorable treatment in taking this exam. So it was completely fair. I didn't know I was an early adopter or a guinea pig. So, but my experience has been mostly on the vendor side and now recently to Facebook. Completely different side of the equation from a security perspective. I remember, back in 2001 to 2000 or late 90s to 2005, there was no way for a test security professional who was kind of getting into this area either, or particularly at an exam sponsor level, to be able to quickly develop certification program directors who were kind of bootstrapping themselves, just like I was, and other test vendors were. I remember initially having to explain to a lot of exam sponsors, even to just helping them justify why security was important to their stakeholders. The main goal for many certifications, particularly in IT, was to get as many people certified as possible, and security was a secondary concern. Now, if we jump forward to 2015, and this has been a growing trend over the last, accelerating over the last 10 years, security is understood to be and expected to be a foundational part of any certification program. It's not something you think of after you have a breach. It's something you bake into the program from before you develop your tests. And so I think that test security as a profession within the industry has matured significantly. And when a profession matures, that's usually the right time to bring in a more structured way of developing professionals and certification. Standards and best practices have become absolutely critical. So while you may have been able to get away with kind of bootstrapping a program in the past without thinking of every aspect of exam security, you have to do that these days, both for yourselves as a certification program or an assessment program, but also if you're looking at accreditation through ANSI or NCCA or one of these other bodies. Security is absolutely fundamental. You need to understand it, be able to adopt it, and be able to demonstrate it. We didn't previously have a consistent industry-wide learning skills and development path, so I'm really happy to see the CESP come along, and I've been kind of tracking it since it was first announced a year or so back. My experience in taking the test, I can say I enjoyed taking the test. I enjoyed preparing for the test. I can admit that I didn't know everything in the, I think it's 15 domains or topics that you have to be familiar with. So there was a learning curve there for me. I didn't find it, though, that it was too difficult for my level of experience. The DOMC item type was very interesting. I would strongly recommend, if you're thinking of taking the exam, in fact, I would say it's kind of mandatory, familiarize yourself with that item type. It's new. It's a little bit different than what people may expect. I'd be interested to see how it evolves as an item type and a test type within the testing industry. And I'm not even sure if all vendors currently able to support it, but that would be interesting to watch as well. I found the exam was very rigorous and secure. the online proctoring experience was great. I mean, it was simple, but at the same time very secure. Working with the proctor, using the technology, went off without a hitch. And I've worked over the last 5 years in both understanding online proctoring from a security perspective, as well as leading the implementation of online proctoring, live online proctoring at Pearson VUE. So I was pleased to see how well that worked. And lastly, I'm looking forward to the release of the Level 2 exam. Hopefully somebody else will beat me to getting certified at the Level 2 level. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to touch briefly on what I see as the benefits of CESP certification from 4 perspectives: to yourselves as program certification program, assessment program, and exam security professionals, individuals. Also, what are the benefits to an exam sponsor? What are the benefits from an industry perspective? And how does this benefit test takers and the public and other stakeholders? This is my perspective, and really, if you look at what I'm going to say, it's actually really the benefits of certification just applied to the CESP. So for ourselves, those who are going to get certified, I agree with everything that David and Jamie have said, that this will provide a comprehensive understanding of a broad set of test security topics. So even if you're already a test security expert, maybe you're a psychometrician or an expert in data forensics or program policies, implementing security program, this will give you a broader context for security from soup to nuts. So I really recommend, even if you don't take the certification, have a look at the certification blueprint and take a look at all the resources and materials that are available. There is a ton of stuff there, and it's all really good. The other benefit, well, it's kind of the same thing really, that there is a defined learning path. So if you're getting into exam security or you have areas that you may be not familiar with, studying for this program will help you avoid reinventing the wheel. And this has always been a big thing of mine. This kind of crosses over into the industry perspective. We've often had to reinvent the wheel. Professionals in certification programs have independently come up with ways of doing things or standards and best practices. And so I think the CESP is a good way to focus on sharing all of that industry best practices and standards, so people don't have to start from the beginning. And lastly, I think that having the designation also gives us, as individual experts, visibility and recognition, just like any certification program does. I think this also helps us sell what we're doing to our stakeholders within our organizations, be able to demonstrate the value of security, demonstrate that we know what we're doing and that we have a methodology that we rely on. From an exam sponsor perspective, this means that if you have people working for you who are responsible for security, whether they be employees or contractors or a third-party vendor that's providing the security services, that you can ensure that they have a baseline level of competency as a generalist. That means you can trust that there'll be better security outcomes, hopefully, that there will be more prevention rather than detection and response. Next slide, please. From a testing community perspective, and I'm thinking of this very broadly, so the people who go to ATP, those of us that go to ICE and CLEAR and to the Test Security Conference and participate in the ATP Security Initiative and other security programs, again, within that community, that we have an opportunity to have a path for professional development, to again set that baseline for security competence and knowledge. I think that if everybody who went to security sessions at ATP knew about this program, I think that we could get more into some of the more advanced topics and not focus so much on, not focus as much on the kind of the certification security 101 or test security 101, which I think would be great. Spend less time and effort arguing, discussing, and explaining fundamentals, which I think it does take up, some amount of time in projects. And if we can economize there, that will also be a benefit to the industry. And as I mentioned before, that these skills are aligned to recognize standards and best practices. So when we talk as an industry, or our representatives of the industry talk to the public about exam security issues, about fairness and validity and why people have to retake tests, I think it gives, it lends more credibility the more we represent ourselves as a profession with standards and with credentials. So that kind of falls into the test takers and public. When I get up and talk about security, people are not saying, well, who's this guy? What does he know? The CESP, just like an information security certification or a data privacy certification or any other kind of certification, nursing, state regulatory, whatever, it kind of, people have that understanding that I know what I'm talking about, that I'm not just spouting a bunch of my own opinion. That's all that I have, so I will turn it back to Jamie.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for speaking today as part of the webinar. We really appreciate it. I think it gives people, it gives them kind of a good understanding from a test taker perspective of what they can expect with this exam. Let's go to our next slide, please. And Mark talked about some of the benefits, and I'll talk in a little bit more specifics about what you receive as a CESP certificate. As I mentioned before, there are two levels. So there's one exam, and we have two cut scores. So we're giving, if somebody achieves a higher cut score, we're giving them recognition for that level of expertise. If you successfully complete the exam, you receive a digital badge, and this badge links back to your score report. So if anyone were to click on it, it's going to take that person back to the score report and talk about when you passed it, what level you passed, and there's a picture of yourself there. So it really is validation that this is the person who received the certification. That digital badge can be used in places like LinkedIn under your certifications, under your profile. It can be used in like an email signature or other social media sites in which you may be a member. I received a couple of questions about recertification or maintenance of certification, and the recertification requirement about every 5 years. So you will be notified typically 6 months before your certification is up, and letting you know that you need to recertify if you want to maintain your certification. We believe that this certification, as Mark talked about, really gives you recognized industry experience. It gives you a professional credential and a standard for which others can say, okay, this person has great baseline expertise and knowledge as a test security generalist. We do plan on creating additional certifications, and rather than additional levels, I would say probably additional specialties in areas such as data forensics or web monitoring. So we'll look at the standards and determine where we want those specialties to be. Let's go to the next slide, please. Lastly, I just wanted to mention again that there are opportunities to network as a test security community. So we have a CESP LinkedIn group, and now we actually have a LinkedIn organization that you can follow, as well as we'll be setting up Facebook and Twitter accounts for CESP. So again, this is really an opportunity to grow as a test security professional, to network with other individuals and be able to bring back valuable information to your organization in terms of test security. That is our webinar for today, but what I'd like to do now is open it up to any questions. So, Rochelle, I'm going to turn this time over to you and have you kind of ask some of the questions that were posted.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jamie. So we have a bunch of questions in the question box. Many of them have been answered, but if you haven't been following, I can repeat a couple of these. One question is there a plan to validate the levels passing standards based on operational data?
So Dave, maybe we'll have Dave answer that.
I'm not quite sure I understand it. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Is there a plan to validate the levels passing standards based on operational data?
You know, I think that's what we did in that original study. We used actual test scores and compared them to supervisor ratings, which is a way to validate the cut scores using actual operational data. There's certainly other things we'll do, and yes, I imagine every one of those will use how people performed on the exam and how they perform in other ways in the real world. You have to get quite creative with those validity studies, but we're going to conduct as many of them as we can, the more individuals that are involved.
Great, thanks, Dave. And here's another question regarding DOMC. Can you just explain it in a little more detail? And also, is there a resource to learn more about DOMC specifically in higher education, like maybe nursing?
Sure. As Jamie mentioned, a website, that's trydomc.com. Lots of stuff there, including sample tests of a lot of different content areas, including, I think, some medical ones. That's a good place. It's got some other documents, some research references are presented there of people that have done work on this DOMC type. As far as what it does, it's not terribly easy to explain. It's certainly much easier to experience, and so go to the website and do that. But basically, the multiple choice question options are randomized and presented one at a time with yes and no buttons. So the task is simple for the candidate. You look at it, you see the stem of the multiple choice question, you see an option. Is it the correct option? Yes. If it's not, no. And then you may get another one. Or if you get the question right or wrong, it'll go to another question. So it's fairly interactive, kind of only as a metaphor, kind of like an adaptive test at the micro level. But it will stop when you get it right or wrong and won't present all of the options. I know that's not a great explanation. I apologize. Much better to go to the website. Okay.
Great. Yes, thanks, Dave. Jamie, is there a time limit for this test?
You know, I saw that question, and because it's computer adaptive, we just haven't had a need to cut the time off so far. But Dave,
you know, I think Mark might know better than us. I think it's 60 minutes, but I'm going to ask Mark. Do you remember what it is?
I think the appointment was 60 minutes. Yes, but you know, as you mentioned, because it's adaptive, the length of time is going to vary depending on the individual taking the test and how quickly they answer the questions. But I think it was a 60-minute allotment.
Yeah, the reason I think we struggled a little bit with answering that is because we simply provided an amount of time that is somewhat irrelevant. Most people finish. I mean, this is not what you would call a speeded test by any stretch of the imagination. So you will if you want to take 60 minutes, you can, although the proctor is watching if you start knitting or watching TV. But you should be able to finish the test in half of that time, even if you're fairly, if you take your time.
Okay, thanks, you guys. Jamie, another question for you. Do you have like maybe a top 1 to 3 resources that you would recommend for people to prepare for the exam in addition to the case studies, exam security breaches case study book? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely, I think that there are some seminal books. One of them is the Handbook on Test Security. So definitely I would look to that one. Another resource would be the TILSA guidebook. So that's the technical issues in large-scale assessment, and it's actually you can either download it for free via PDF, or you can get a hard copy for $4. And so I think some of those resources, those two in particular, would be great. There's operational best practices in large-scale assessments that I think would be another one. And really, the other one is the AERA, NCME, APA standards. And really, as a testing professional, you need that regardless. But in this latest version of those standards, it specifically talks about test security. And so those would definitely be probably my top 3 or 4.
I'll just add one. There are about 8 to 10 different sets of guidelines or best practices published now on security or related security. Jamie mentioned the standards. ATP has a couple of them. The Council of Chief State School Officers has a couple. The International Test Commission. You don't have to know the guidelines and the best practices or the standards. You just have to know what these documents contain, how they're different from each other, why they're valuable in practice. So that you need to be familiar with them, although you don't need to memorize the actual guidelines or standards.
David, I'd add as a useful resource, although it's not specifically devoted to test security, and that is the ICE Certification Handbook. It certainly takes a look at security in the context of the NCCA standard for accreditation, and there are some chapters in there by renowned security experts that talk about, there's 1 or 2 chapters in there that talk about exam security and technology and testing, which also has a security angle.
Yeah, that's great. I should have mentioned them as well. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thanks to all of you for your input. Just so you know, I will include that list of resources with a follow-up email that you'll get from me. It might take a couple days this time, but I will make sure that information is included in the email. So watch for that from me, hopefully by the end of the week or Monday. I think we have time for maybe one more question. And this question is, can you give more details on the cut score process, number of experts, duration, completely factorial design, etc.?
Not a very good final question, I don't think. It's a great question. Just there's not a lot of time. We used, I can't remember, maybe 8 experts, all within Caveon, who rated every question for difficulty at both the expert or level 2 and the level 1 levels. Sorry about the background noise. That was basically the study, and then we validated those results with an analysis of variance, and they were validated. So we were able to get strong difficulty ratings as well as an estimate of where the cut scores should be set. I can provide more information if you want to communicate with me by email. Be happy to.
Great, yes, that was quite a process. So we'll go ahead and close the question section. We always like to keep these under an hour. So if we can just go to the next slide.
So I wanted to thank you again for your time today in joining us and learning about the CESP program. Loved all the questions. They're really some great questions. And for those questions that we did not get to, we'll make sure and answer them in our follow-up email that includes the link to the slides as well as the link to the recording. And as Dave mentioned, if you have any additional questions or you want to follow up with us personally, please go ahead and do that. Again, I want to thank our guest speaker, Mark Poole, for joining us today, and also thank Dave for his time and also the development of this program. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on an upcoming webinar.